Hey there, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and hey, we got a week with new Beyonce songs. If only that was the only thing that was happening. And this, it's Billboard BREAKDOwn. I don't remember. There are some weeks where this job is manageable or fun. This is probably not going to be one of them. Hell, I could have just had my hands full with just Beyonce releasing a pair of country songs or Noah Kahan seeing more persistent success. But let's be real, that's not why the majority of you are peeking in. No, for those of you who saw my video around Kanye West, Dolla, and Vultures on my main channel, you're probably wondering how on earth I choose to cover it here. If you haven't seen that video, link over there. It's only a minute long on my main channel. I highly recommend you check it out because it's going to provide some illustrative context to what's gonna happen next. Specifically, I also want y'all to take a look at the comments section as well because it sure ain't pretty. It's probably not gonna be pretty down there either, a warning in advance to be civil. Because at this point, I think a larger reasoned exploration of that response, it's long overdue. But before we get into all that, let's keep to our regular routine, the top 10. We're holding on for another week. We got Lovin' On Me by Jack Harlow at number 1, but likely not for much longer. He dominates radio and streams are still good, but the challenger is now firmly in sight. Debuting at number 2, Texas Hold'em by Beyonce. Huge sales, strong streaming, the radio is already revving up. It's probably going to number 1 next week, and while I've got my thoughts on it later on, I will consider its appearance here a net positive. Not so much for our next debut in the top 10, Carnival by Kanye West and Dolla, with uncredited features from Playboi Carti and Rich the Kid at number 3. It's here predominantly on streaming with a smattering of sales, but given radio is not going to touch this, even if the album has legs, I don't see this lasting in the top 10 at all. Unfortunately, that means there's another credible challenger waiting in the wings. Beautiful Things by Benson Boone at number 4. He's got a ton of streaming, he had a good sales week, there's radio traction. We're likely not getting rid of this one anytime soon. Enjoy. Hell, I'd take Lose Control by Teddy Swims over this down at number 5, which might be reaching its peak as streaming slipped and the radio growth has been unsteady. But it wasn't enough to hold over Cruel Summer by Taylor Swift at number 6, which along with Snooze by SZA at number 7, it's just an open free fall across the board, where SZA has more stable streams, but Taylor's got the radio margin. Then we have I Remember Everything by Zach Bryan and Casey Musgraves at number 8. Again, rock solid streaming, but radio's just never touched it. But hey, it held over Greedy by Tate McRae at number 9, which had a weirdly good week on the radio to compensate for its streaming falling into the toilet. Finally, and this is also a big one, finally entering the top 10, Stick Season by Noah Kahan at number 10. It's by no means his best song, but by now it's his biggest hit. As the streams are there, radio is firmly behind him. I can imagine this has a run all throughout the spring. It's gonna get higher, and especially with his album's frankly ridiculous longevity on the charts. Look, even if I don't really like this guy, I called him as a crossover star when I first reviewed him back in 2022. We are not getting rid of him that easily. Now that takes us naturally to our losers and dropouts. And since we are, regrettably, in an album bomb week, there is a lot of them. A lot of big songs too, so handily clinching their year-end Hot 100 spot. We got White Horse by Chris Stapleton, Fuck You Mean by Gunna, Lil Boo Thang by Paul Russell, My Love Mine All Mine by Mitski, and then likely falling just short of that official list, we got Strangers by Kenya Grace, 500 Pounds by Lil Tecca, and Que Onda by Cali24, Chino Pacas, and Fuerza Regida. And we had a lot of losers here too, so let's start off with the debut of Bandit by Don Toliver collapsing to 78, which neatly follows off the ongoing losses of Monaco by Bad Bunny at 97, might as well add Perro Negro with Fide at 99, FTCU by Nicki Minaj at 71, might as well tack on Everybody with Lil Uzi Vert falling to 40, Spin You Around 124 by Morgan Wallen at 70, Igual Que Un Angel by Caliuchis and Peso Pluma at 69, Think You the Shit, Fart by Ice Spice at 62, and Hiss by Megan Thee Stallion at 48. Frankly, I'm shocked that it lasted this long. Then we had the gains that fell back sharply, like Vampire by Olivia Rodrigo at 43, On My Mama by Victoria Monet at 44, and X's by Tate McRae at 49, and the rest, Look, it's all over the damn place. Let's start with Drake, who really did not have a good week with first-person shooter with J. Cole at 47, and I Don't Give a Fuck with Yeet at 88, and neither did Jelly Roll with Need a Favor falling to 50 and Wild Ones with Jesse Murph at 45. Outside of that, working from the bottom up, Prove It by 21 Savage and Summer Walker at 98. Let's tack on Nana with Travis Scott and Metro Boomin at 80. By Big X The Plug at 96. We Don't Fight Anymore by Carly Pierce featuring Chris Stapleton at 92. Different Round Here by Riley Green and Luke Combs at 90. Belakeo by Peso Pluma and Anita at 87. Harley Quinn by Fuerza Regida and Marshmello at 85. And Act 2 Date at 8 by Four Bats at 81. Then we got the revival of Murder on the Dance Floor by Sophia Alice Bextor sliding down to 73. One of the Girls by The Weeknd, Jenny, and Lily Rose Depp at 72. World on Fire by Nate Smith at 56. Selfish by Justin Timberlake at 37. And finally, Yes and by Ariana Grande already down at 31. The single's really underperforming. The fact they are rushing a Mariah Carey remix to bolster it has me a lot more worried about that Ariana Grande album than I expected to be. Now naturally, on an album bomb week, we don't really have as much in terms of returns or gains, but there are a few. I mean, it makes sense that Yeah by Usher featuring Lil Jon and Ludacris made a big return to 20 after the Super Bowl performance. I mean, I got no complaints, the song's an absolute classic. I'm happy to see it here. I'm also quite pleased to see She Calls Me Back by Noah Kahan and Casey Musgraves coming back at 91, if only likely for a week riding Noah Kahan's re-release album boost, which also translated to the gains for Northern Attitude with Hosier climbing up to 75. What initially caught me off guard here was the continued boost for Standing Next to You by Jungkook up to 61, but you know what, he had a good sales week, I'm not surprised, and you can also recall a remix of this song with Usher that got tacked onto Usher's album, and that's been shipped to radio and is thus far doing pretty okay. Would that Usher have been the album bomb that we would have got? But no, and you know what, for a change of pace, let me go back to my old album bomb rules for Vulture, where if you got more than 8 songs debuting, I only talk about those in the top 40, so to speak. So outside of that, we have Do It at 52, Paid at 53, Keys to My Life at 55, Paperwork at 64, Big Forgiveness at 65, Hoodrat at 67, Problematic at 79, Good Don't Die at 93, and King at 94. So, with that thankfully easing some workload here, believe me, I got a reason why I'm doing it, we have a ways to go before we get to Kanye proper. Let's start off with number 100, Sunday Service by Latto.
How you let them cheat and take them back? Must be your only nigga. I get loud just like my weed. I don't watch my tone with niggas. I hang up the phone on niggas. You ain't my daddy, bitch, I'm big mama.
I mean, don't mind me, I'm just appreciating the irony that Latto charted this week at the bottom with a song that on title alone reminds me of one of the few late period Kanye associations I actually kind of like. And hell, she doesn't have Dr. Luke anywhere near this tier. We're starting on an upswing. And that continues with a pretty good bass line behind all the textured percussion in the groove. The production might be a bit short on melody, but it's pretty well assembled and produced. Shame Latto doesn't really do much with it. This is arguably a blend of her flexing, running through guys who can't get over that, and a bunch of easy subs at Nicki Minaj because, well, Nicki's an easy target right now. But Latto's flow has never been as elastic or interesting as she thinks it is, and the clunkier change-ups remind me just how far she is behind compared to Megan Thee Stallion or Doja Cat. The production's doing a lot of heavy lifting here, and given that the hook isn't quite as punchy as it should be, I don't know, it's not bad, just not special either. Number 89, Yeah Glow by GloRilla.
Yeah, glow. Slapping rap bitches and making bail, ho. Yeah, glow. Two-tone Cartier match the nails, ho. Yeah, glow. No competition, these bitches stale, ho.
I'm still not quite sure how much runway GloRilla will have after a breakthrough a couple of years back. It's already been, frankly, a bit longer than I've expected, and I'm a bit surprised this is charting at all. But honestly, I get why, because this kind of works. GloRilla's flow is tightened up a decent bit, and she's got that raw, bruising contempt to just roll over the haters alongside the flexing. It's convincing. I wouldn't exactly call it all that distinct, but she can sell it better than most. And to my pleasant surprise, the production actually steps up too. That menacing bass line, the scratching behind the sharper percussion, the faded melody in the backdrop. This is a working formula for her, especially when that multi-tracked hook has some real punch. It's very obviously playing to a similar mid-2000s formula, and I wouldn't call this super distinctive compared to those, but it is an improvement. I think it's decent. I'll take it. Number 86, You're Gonna Go Far by Noah Kahan.
Oh, you love, and we'll all be here forever.
if you're wondering why 2 new Noah Kahan songs debuted this week, it's because of the second reissue of Stick Season that contains all the remixes he's put out the past year or so, which caused a gradual bump for a lot of them. And thus, I'm a little bit annoyed because this song was on the first re-release of Stick Season with just Noah Kahan solo, but the remix on the second re-release has Brandi Carlile on it. We could have had her on this. Welcome to another completely missed opportunity. Well, whatever. This is Noah Kahan making his spare folk version of Morgan Wallen's More Than My Hometown, where the girl is about to chase bigger dreams outside of their shitty little small town, and thus leaving him behind. And you know, where Morgan Wallen went for some introspection and how he's the one who can't leave and was kind of interesting in that, Noah Kahan dumps a metric ton of passive-aggressive projection on this girl that despite every moment where he tries to wish her well and he's totally not angry, he seems very acutely aware that of course she will come back to him. We'll be here forever. Even despite the acknowledgments that the town is kinda shitty. Why would she come back? Now the third verse is what really soured me on this song. From the "we're overdue" to her revival, where she says that she's gonna go out and try to make a difference traveling outside of that, and he drunkenly shuts her down. I mean, I know there's emotional truth in his response and some of the awkwardness of the first verse, but it feels so self-serving, especially with the over-polished mix and the faux anthemic hook, that it doesn't feel real in the same way that any number of Laurie McKenna albums about small down decay and those who leave them do. For what it's worth, the Brandi Carlile remix is better. She's a way better singer. The harmonies on the hook are really nice, and she takes the third verse and adding another dejected voice for broader perspective helps the communal feel of a town being left behind rather than just the confines of a relationship. But yeah, not the worst thing Noah Kahan's ever released, but I have no interest in going back to it. Sorry. Number 39, actually no, stop right there. Because as I said in my video last week, hope you went to check it out, I'm not reviewing Kanye West. Or Vultures. I haven't heard the album. I have no incentive to do so. Hell, I haven't properly reviewed a Kanye album since 2018, and I arguably should not have done that with Ye, given everything I've learned about those Wyoming sessions behind the scenes. You know, the album that he wanted to call Hitler at the time. But I was more forgiving for Jesus is King and Donda when they had their album bombs in 2019 and 2021. But there are consequences for crossing certain lines. And he has not earned the benefit of my good faith on my channels, on my platform. And thus what I'm going to do instead are the other entries for where I normally talk about a Kanye West Ty Dolla $ign song. I'm going to examine not just the backlash that I've received, but the context behind very specific arguments because I find the mindset revealing. But before we get into all that, number 38, 16 Carriages by Beyonce.
Watch them ride with my dreams away to the summer sunset on a holy night on a long black road. All the tears I fight.
You know, there's a part of me that wants to start the whole Beyonce country discourse now just to get it out of the way. I don't mind she's in the genre, she's long had roots in Texas, she's done it before, and she's a good enough performer to sell it, and she will curate the right people around her. Probably a lot of black folks in country right now who deserve more attention that Music Road does not tend to give. But I also know that like with house music in 2022, Beyonce will tour and cultivate within that sound to fit her, and then leave and do something else. And there's going to be nuance missed along the way. And let's not act like she's breaking down barriers within country music when any project she puts out is not going to drive institutional change. And there are plenty of black folks making country right now that'll be there before and after Beyonce. It would suck to see their history subsumed into her own personal narrative. So now that I pissed off even more people, I have to come here and say that despite liking Beyonce making a touring as hell song rooted in just how many years she's been on the road since her teenage years, with some decent guitar and organ texture, and I actually really like her vocals. My god, the groove is a mess here. An attempted lumbering stutter of a clap where by the back half of the song these buzzy synths are dropped over everything. It feels really overproduced when it didn't need to be. It feels like the song just can't get anything going or build any rollick for an anthemic moment or function as much of a torch song. It's just really clunky. I mean, I don't think it's bad by any means. I'm just not close to being wowed by it. That's all. Number 34, Let's start with the critique. Who are you? Well, this is easily the most common remark thrown at me off of my video, and well, I could say hyperliteral and be, hey, my name is Mark Grondin. I'm the host of Spectrum Pulse and Billboard Breakdown, where we talk about music, movies, art, and culture, where I've been discussing music since some of y'all were in kindergarten, if not younger, and hell, that's just very possible, given my oldest public writings on Kanye go back to 2010. That's not what that comment is about. No. I expected it as soon as my video caught escape velocity, broke outside of my own audience and algorithm bubble, and impacted a larger public that's probably never seen those reviews, or me. And that's understandable, especially given all the blunt language I used. If all you're used to is praise, that video might shock you. But these fandoms are not all stupid. The underlying question of who are you? Who are you to be saying this about him? We've placed him on a pedestal. You're not a fan. How dare you impugn his reputation? To him, it's about power. Who is allowed to question him? Because the more questions and critique that he faces, and by extension them, the more fragile their idol might become. And that naturally takes us to number 33. It's not that deep. So I think this is the first deflection that's actually worth caring about, because immediately it is a contradiction. You praise the absolute hell out of Kanye as a genius and an icon, but it's also totally not that deep, just entertainment. Don't you dare look behind that curtain. Now, there is a whole subset of casual listeners who don't really care about anything beyond new Kanye album. Probably sounds good. I'll give it a shot. Of which I think there is a responsibility for me as a critic to hope that they try to think a little bit more deeply about what they choose to consume and its content. But they also don't care enough to make an argument in my comments section. This is for the stans that do. And they want to brush aside any critique of what Kanye West says and does and platforms, because if they think a little bit more deeply about it, they might be forced to confront something that they don't like, and that reflects upon them, something within themselves they don't like. They had an emotional response to art. That emotion matters to them. By reapproaching that art with new information, the emotional response might change. Hell, I might as well include the line of "he's trolling," which at this point, I'll reiterate my common stance. What a lot of folks say ironically to get a rise out of folks, they ultimately believe unironically. It comes out in the cards, and the money spent counts the same either way. Of course, we can't forget the folks who use the argument disingenuously, who absolutely know this shit with Kanye does run deeper, and this argument is just built to waste my time. As well as number 30, separate the art from the artist. You know, I gotta wonder if left-leaning postmodern philosophers Roland Barthes and Michel Foucault ever truly deeply considered the nightmare that would come for so many consumers bastardizing death of the author and what is an author in order to justify their consumption. I mean, that's a limit that can come up with postmodern philosophy in terms of impacting real material conditions, especially when your personal deconstruction gets commodified. I mean, look what happened with punk. It's a big reason why there's a lot of tension between postmodern and socialist. But that's the thing, the majority of people don't recognize what I'm talking about. They neither know nor care about that distinction in theory. This is in a classroom with academic rigors and assumptions of good faith critique. So conversations of separating the art from the artist in this setting on YouTube, they take a different meaning. They want to be absolved of any sense of moral guilt for continuing to buy or stream or enjoy art made by bad people, so they don't have to think about the consequences of doing so. It becomes a plea for ignorance. But again, note the contradiction. As a critic and an expert with a platform, there is an expectation for depth and rigor for which I strive to uphold, and that includes the necessary context of an artist's impact on the work, up until I don't validate your opinion of that artist, where the separation between art and artist is then demanded. I mean, I could then highlight that a deeper examination of Kanye West art going back decades now often betrays exactly what he believes, or that in a performance medium, the artist's personal method can be intrinsic for the understanding or appreciation of a work, or, and this is a loaded one, that by accepting the artist's deep flaws in connection with the works themselves and examining your emotional response to them, that added context, you might face some tangible introspection, challenges you on what you believe. But you know, I did an entire video essay on this 3 years ago, examining it in detail. Please go watch it. In reality, again, it's a plea for ignorance, that I shut up if I know what's good for me. So before we get to the impact of all of that, number 28, Forever by Noah Kahan.
For the rest of my life, I'll build a boat For when the river gets high, I'll meet a girl in the heat of July, and I'll tell her so she knows.
So this is the sole original track of that second re-release. No surprise it charted this high, and okay, look, it's hard for me to say much about this. It starts off as a very spare, frail acoustic love song, where with all the vocal overdubs, it's got the feel of copying Justin Vernon's notes. And you know what, that's fine. Those are good notes to copy. The harmonies are rather quite pleasant. Noah Kahan does have a knack for detail in painting this love story, and I frankly didn't mind how the song built up a bit more of a stomping rollick for the second verse and the final hook. It's also saccharine as all hell, and if, say, Ed Sheeran released this, it would probably get dunked on a lot more for a lot of superficial bullshit reasons. But look, Noah Kahan annoys me when the sour side of his writing doesn't feel earned. When he plays it straight down the middle like this, he's not particularly interesting, but it's hard to get that angry about. It's fine. So now getting back to something that very much is not fine, number 26, how you use your platform. So this is an argument I have seen from two sides. The if you don't have something nice to say, don't say not anything at all. That's often made by liberals who care more about manners and constraints of discourse rather than what's actually being fucking said. A very dangerous path to normalization and giving Kanye West credit that he does not deserve based on, well, he's rich, he has a platform. Surely he knows what he's talking about when he very clearly doesn't. And by those who recognize that by me speaking on this at all, I'm potentially exposing more folks to bad ideas. Don't give it oxygen, put it out of your mind. I'm going to focus on the latter group because there is some merit to that argument. After all, I don't cover National Socialist black metal for that exact reason. But this is where the nuances of platforms and power dynamics matter. NSBM is an ugly niche subgenre populated by the absolute dregs of the scene. That music is intentionally ugly. It'll likely never impact the Billboard charts. Woe betide us if it does. An album of Vultures' size and magnitude, it's different. It's a no-win scenario. If I choose to cover it regularly, it's a normalizing cover for what's being said and what it represents, no matter how much I might tear into it. If I ignore it entirely, I get spammed with comments asking for me to cover it. And more importantly, I cede my voice and platform to the reckless media environments that will only give it more coverage and way more praise. So with the power and platform that y'all have given me, the moral imperative is for me to speak out, poison the toxic positivity, and then take the backlash. And I'm pretty consistent in that too. And there's nuance in the edge cases. I don't cover NSBM. I never have. Yes, I reviewed Try That in a Small Town by Jason Aldean on Billboard Breakdown and my worst list of 2023 for being white nationalist and reactionary, but it was done in the context of someone who has roots in country as a subgenre and the expertise and knowledge to excise the grift effectively rather than the whole shallow liberal pile-on. It's why I cover all those painfully cringy white nationalist dipshit rappers when they chart for 1 week on Billboard Breakdown before getting tossed aside. There is a knowledge of their disposability, the constructed nature of the Hot 100 charts, and by extension, this show tends to act as a broad-based equalizer and normalizer, for better and for worse. But I don't review their albums. I didn't review the Jason Aldean album that had Try That in a Small Town on it, because I knew it would tank. I was right. And it goes on from there. I've never reviewed a full 6ix9ine album. When the allegations came out around Melanie Martinez, I stopped covering her, and I never will. My one review of XXXTentacion was more a deconstruction of his fandom than a proper review. Hell, that is how I've approached Kanye West album reviews since 2019. Hell, I will give you 2 examples now that you might not know about. The first being that I don't think I will ever cover another Sia album, given what happened with Music, the movie. There are some things, personally, that I consider beyond the pale. Here's another. I've never covered a modern Nas album, because I believe the allegations from Khalees. Am I perfect here? God, no. I probably should never have covered Marilyn Manson in 2017, especially when that album sucked. I definitely should not have covered R. Kelly's album in 2013, or Chris Brown's projects in 2014 or 2015, but I'm also willing to give myself a little bit of grace and mixed to outright negative discussions of art in my first couple years on YouTube, rather than a grown-ass man in his mid-40s spewing hate and misinformation to a much larger audience. Which naturally takes us to number 23. Whataboutism. This is where you're going to get a bunch of liberal arguments of hypocrisy from people where, oh, you're going to review these rappers who kill people in gangs, but not Kanye spewing misogyny and anti-Semitism and all manner of conspiratorial nonsense. And this argument flat out sucks, just because it relies on the shallowest of equivocations and more sustained ignorance from those people. It requires them to not know about all the times I bring up gang violence when the songs chart on Billboard Breakdown or in the album reviews, where there is a systemic complexity in examining artistic response, and a very difficult conversation that I'm willing to try to have. But those making this argument, they deliberately do not want to have that conversation about what Kanye has said and done. So if I choose to honor the equivalency that they have made in order to make the review and necessarily bring all that up, as I've consistently done, why then would you want me to stop talking? And this is where we have to bring up degree and proportionality. I mean, the vast majority of the critique of music is subjective, inconsistent to time and place and critic and system of morality. And there are absolutely shades of gray in all of this. Hell, I can bring up more that you probably haven't even considered in this conversation, like how Kanye West is well known in the industry for using ghostwriters and ghost producers, to say nothing of all of his collaborating producers and writers over the years. So how much of this moral impetus falls on him? The point here is that there is a spectrum of discussing this, and by necessity, there's gonna be complexity and nuance. But when you combine Kanye's power and his reach and his fame and his influence, you run into an outlier. A position where extenuating circumstances, given that he is a multimillionaire, if not a billionaire, are in play. And another contradiction the stands have to hold on to. If he's on the pedestal, should he not be judged more harshly in the usage of his power, given its impact? Or because of his power, is he then granted a larger pass? I mean, I thought with great power comes great responsibility. This is all combined with the reality that Kanye isn't even playing by the rules of his own game and industry in terms of sample clearance. It's why the albums keep getting pulled off of streaming time and time again. And the expectation that he should just be given a free pass, when I know for a fact that such a pass would never be extended to the legends of rap that these stands don't even recognize, who are far more exploited by the industry and fucked up sampling laws than Kanye ever was. But the reality here is that so much of this is tied into prosperity gospel rhetoric, where righteousness compounds, but a single sin on your soul weighs the same regardless of what it is. In good faith, it's the root of all of this whataboutism, and the free pass given to anyone looking to express their values by consuming music. Because under late capitalism, that's where the value is apparently only identified. And that takes us to number 3. Why even bother? So I know there's a lot of folks who have chosen to say nothing rather than engage with this at all. Too much of a hassle and a headache. And believe me, I get it. If you don't have a larger platform to potentially affect change, I get it even more. This is also where you're going to encounter folks who say I'm doing this for clout or for money, as if the grand total of $2 I got from that short was some sort of massive boon. And if I was really cynically doing all that, I would have made plenty of long-form reviews exposing a bunch of those acts I previously mentioned at length alongside their albums, and I would have made bank doing so, alongside probably cultivating an audience that I could not stand, who expect me to do those dunks. I'd rather not. So yes, I consider this an extreme situation. I have taken rare measures to accommodate it. And I'm not going to be bothering with those 2 planned sequel albums that I doubt are even going to get released. I'm saying my piece now. I'm moving on. Frankly, I would just be repeating myself. Because there is a difference between measured considerations of how one uses a platform, acknowledging when someone gets it wrong or right, past and future, versus going off the deep end and never admitting fault or fallibility, and every contradiction that defies reason that the fan base has argued in order to maintain the power. Because the reality here is, it is about power, and a fan base that would rather worship it than question its usage. And that makes sense. Fascism, after all, is inherently contradictory. It's not supposed to make sense. Relying way more on nostalgic aesthetics of strength rather than the fragile reality, where tangible success is subsumed under petty grievances and bitter grudges, a war that can never be won, where the vendettas run more on emotionality than logic because words don't stop boots or bullets. And art at its core is a conversation. It runs on emotionality. It might even make these sentiments tantalizing, especially if you don't think about it. Heighten the phantasms of those who have bought in. And at this scale, if y'all have granted me a platform, I've got a responsibility to handle this properly. Not by granting my platform to his ideas, but describing their reality from exterior. And then why folks defend it, so you can recognize it too. And truth be told, I've seen worse backlashes. Look at the summer of 2021 for a very memorable and stupid example. But when I see the rhetoric of being used around this album, where if it came from anyone else, it would not be getting anywhere near the defenses, and y'all know that, it only further belies me taking exceptional measures here. It's got me concerned on a deeper level. But hey, you know what? I think it concerns y'all too. You know. After all, you might call this grandstanding or virtue signaling, and if facts aren't caring about your feelings, especially when the evidence is plain as day what he said and done, why are you so angry I'm pointing it out? Because truth be told, I think I gave y'all way more grace than you probably deserved or will return to me. Think on that. And finally, number 2, Texas Hold'em by Beyonce.
So lay your cards down, 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 down. So park your Lexus and throw your keys up. Stick around, round, 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 round. Stick around.
And thank God we're ending this off with a Beyonce song I actually really like, where even she's now making stomp clap folk music, including a goddamn whistle pulled straight from Edward Sharpe. We're now firmly in nostalgia for the early 2010s. That's uncanny as hell. And in this case, it's a pretty straightforward hoedown. It's built for line dancing. A solid acoustic line balanced by Rhiannon Giddens on banjo and viola, and Beyonce can sell this sort of swagger in her sleep, even if I think the percussion and vocal layering are a little bit too polished and not well blended to nail that earthier, more organic feel. But then there's the lyrics. I do find it interesting that Beyonce is still loose enough that despite how imperial she can be, she can still party pretty hard, and it feels way more convincing with her in country than when she's tried to push trap, which is a lot stiffer. Now granted, 2010's trap Beyonce has always felt kind of hit and miss to me. I think it comes down to her performance, as I've always liked her richer, organic tones that are flattered with this mix. But there is still something of a pose, I get that. In fact, this is gonna sound like heresy, in principle, it kind of reminds me a little of Kesha's Timber and playing to a bouncy country dance song ready-made for pop crossover, where you could tell that she is comfortable in this space and she's gonna have a great time, but she's not really firmly rooted there. And you know what, that's fine. Timber is a great song. This is pretty damn good too. I'll take it. And yeah, you know what? I think it's gonna run away with the best of the week. And you know what? Yeah, Glow by GloRilla is the honorable mention. I'm just a little surprised how much I like that. Worst of the week, dishonorable mention. Let's be real here. It would have been something from Vultures, probably through a combination of bad Kanye West bars and worse production that would have pissed me off. But again, I have not heard the album. So I'm going to leave it up to all y'all unfortunate souls who actually heard the damn thing to pick out what you think my worst of the week would have been. Leave suggestions in the comments. They would be a nice distraction from the hellscape of discourse I probably unleashed. Next week, though, hopefully something a little bit more normal. Stay tuned for that. Until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time.